This house, every glass wall and multi-million-dollar system, was my design. But tonight, at our $100,000 party, I am just an ornament my husband is set to discard. He raises his glass. A toast, he says to 200 guests, to saying goodbye to the past and welcoming the future. His eyes pass over me, cold, and land on Chloe. He does not know the system is ready. My name is Eliza Vance. I am 35 years old, and I am a ghost in my own home. The air in our Austin mansion was thick tonight, vibrating with the synthetic bass of a curated playlist and the collective ego of 200 of the city's tech elite. The party, a $100,000 spectacle, spilled out onto the cantilevered terrace, overlooking the Texas Hill Country. Every pane of glass, every automated light panel, every whisper-quiet climate control vent was mine. I had designed this house, just as I had designed the company it was meant to celebrate, Ethelred Innovations. Tonight was its new product launch, but I was invisible. I stood near the floating staircase, holding a champagne flute I had not touched for an hour. The liquid was warm now. I watched my husband, Julian Vance, navigate the crowd. He was a star, a gravitational center. His suit was impossibly sharp, his laugh booming just enough to command attention. Investors orbited him. Tech bloggers hung on his every word. He was the face. I was the architecture, the foundation buried deep underground. Brilliant, they once called me, but reclusive. I preferred the clean logic of code to the messy politics of people. A preference. I realized too late that Julian had exploited until it became my cage. A temporary stage was set up by the infinity pool, the Ethelred logo glowing in holographic blue behind it. Julian finally broke from his circle of admirers and moved toward it. He was not alone. Chloe Reed, our vice president of marketing, ascended the steps with him. She was 28, all sharp angles, a predatory energy barely masked by a bright, ambitious smile. She wore a red dress that sliced through the neutral tones of the party. She was the perfect brand. She was everything I was not. Julian tapped the microphone. The low hum of conversation died instantly. He beamed, soaking in the adoration, waiting a beat too long. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice smooth, practiced, the voice of a keynote speaker. Tonight is not just about a product, it is about a vision, it is about the future. Ethelred has always been about looking forward, about redefining the space we live in. He spoke for 10 minutes about innovation, about synergy, about the relentless push for optimization. The guests were rapt. They saw a leader, a visionary. I saw a man reading a script Chloe had likely helped him write, full of her signature buzzwords. He was good at this part. He could sell ice in a blizzard, and they would thank him for the chill. He paused, his expression shifting from professional enthusiasm to one of staged personal gravity. The air crackled. And in the spirit of that future, he said, in the spirit of true innovation, I have a personal announcement to make. A murmur went through the crowd. This was unexpected. This was bonus content. Ethelred Innovations has become what it is, he continued, his voice dropping slightly, by being ruthless, by knowing when to cut away legacy burdens that are no longer efficient. His eyes scanned the room. I felt the weight of his gaze before it even landed. He found me, standing in the shadow of the steel staircase. His look was not apologetic. It was not even sad. It was cold, dismissive, final. Eliza, he said, his voice carrying across the silent, sprawling room. My wife. He did not need to point. Every head turned, a slow, sickening ripple of movement, until 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. I felt the heat of their collective stare. Eliza was a wonderful part of my past, he announced. She was foundational. He used the past tense, as if I were already dead. My breath caught. This was it. It was happening exactly as the data had predicted. But the future, he declared, his voice rising again, requires a new operating system. He said it. He actually said it. He reduced 10 years of my life, my work, my sacrifice, into a cheap tech metaphor for public consumption. He had publicly, coldly, declared me obsolete. As if on cue, Chloe Reed, who had been standing just behind him, stepped forward. She placed a possessive hand on his forearm. It was not a gesture of support. It was an act of acquisition. The silence in the room changed. It was no longer expectant. It was suffocating, thick with embarrassment that was not mine, but was directed at me. I heard a sharp gasp. Someone near the bar dropped a glass, the sound exploding in the quiet. The tech bloggers were already typing furiously into their phones. Julian, oblivious or perhaps embaldled by the shock, smiled. He raised his glass. Not to me, but to her. I am proud to announce, he projected, that the new era of Ethelred innovations will be led by myself, and by Chloe. The humiliation was absolute. It was a physical thing, a crushing pressure on my chest. I was a statue in a museum of my own making, a relic being auctioned off. They were all staring, waiting for the reaction he wanted. They were waiting for the tears, the shouts, the dramatic, stumbling exit. They were waiting for the unstable, emotional wife he had doubtless been describing in closed-door meetings for months. I did not cry. I did not run. I held their gaze, my expression perfectly neutral. I let the silence stretch, letting their discomfort build. Julian's smile faltered, just for a second. This was not the scene he had rehearsed. My heart was hammering, not with sorrow, but with a cold, clear adrenaline. He thought this was his coronation. He thought he was cutting me out. He had forgotten who built the kingdom. He had forgotten who held the keys. I lowered my chin slightly, a small, almost imperceptible nod. My eyes drifted away from my husband and his mistress, past the horrified investors, and landed on the sleek, dark tablet mounted into the main wall. The central control system, my core, the brain I had designed, which controlled every lock, every camera, every byte of data in this house and in the company itself. Right on schedule. I thought. Begin. 10 years ago. Julian Vance was just a chaotic programmer fueled by caffeine and a single explosive idea. I was a senior systems architect at a top-tier firm, designing secure networks for global finance. We met at a dismal tech incubator event in a badly lit conference room. He was pitching a vague, almost mystical concept of a connected home, but his presentation was a structural disaster. The code was sloppy, the architecture was non-existent, and the investors were checking their watches. But I saw it. Beneath the tangled mess of his pitch, the idea was a diamond. He had the fire, the vision, the charisma. He just had no skeleton. I was the architect. I found him after his pitch, nursing a beer, surrounded by polite dismissals. I took a cocktail napkin. I did not talk about his vision. I talked about protocols. I sketched a central nervous system, a unified language that could make a home's security, lighting, climate, and media systems speak to each other. A brain, a single, integrated core. He watched me, his eyes wide, the first time I had ever seen him truly silent. That night, over stale coffee that bled into sunrise. The core was born. It was my logic, my design, my architecture. It was the protocol that would become the foundation of Ethelred innovations. We fell in love over circuit boards and late-night debugging sessions. It was a romance built on shared ambition. He was the thunder. I was the lightning. He saw the future, and I built the engine that would get us there. When he proposed a year later, he did it with a prototype of our first smart lock, the one that finally recognized my biometric signature. We married. We formed the company. And then came the first, quiet sacrifice, Julian sat me down in our tiny apartment, his hand over mine. "Eliza, you are the genius," he said, and I believe he meant it then. "We both know this, but the market needs a face. They need a visionary, a showman. They do not want a reclusive architect. They want me." He asked me to let him be that face. He asked me to let the patents for the core, the public credit, be in his name. It was, he insisted, for the good of the company, for the good of us. I believed in us. I believed in the work, so I agreed. I signed the papers. I stepped back into the shadows. I did not just step back. I became the launch pad. In the first 5 years, while Julian was practicing his keynote speeches and honing his public persona, I was the one working my old connections. My reputation as a systems architect was my only remaining currency, and I spent it all. I called in favors from my contacts in the high-end construction and luxury design worlds. I convinced them to take a chance on our unproven, unknown technology. I got Ethelred into the first batch of multi-million-dollar condo developments in Miami and Los Angeles. I negotiated the integration deals. Julian just showed up for the press photos, smiling as if he had built it all himself. My role solidified into something I had never intended. I became the supportive wife. My days were a blur of managing our new, sterile glass mansion, the one I had designed as our primary showcase. I planned the investor dinners, smoothed the egos of shareholders, and listened. God, I listened. I became his primary sounding board, his corporate therapist. I absorbed his fears about expansion, his rants about the board, his anxieties about the press. And when he finally fell asleep, exhausted from the performance of being Julian Vance, my real work began. I would go to my own terminal, firewalled from the rest of the house network. I would dive deep into the core. I was the only one who truly understood its complexities, its vulnerabilities. I patched security holes before they became public breaches. I optimized the code, pushing updates quietly in the dead of night. I was the silent, unpaid, chief technology officer of a billion-dollar company. The success, when it came, was intoxicating, and it poisoned him. Julian's confidence metastasized. The us slowly, almost imperceptibly, dissolved, replaced by me. My contributions were no longer a partnership, they were an expectation. My late-night work on the core was just tinkering. My management of our home and his chaotic schedule was just what wives do. I remember the first time he cut me down in front of others. It was a board meeting, about 2 years ago. We were discussing a new line of security sensors. I suggested a protocol change, a simple, elegant way to make the data encryption more robust without sacrificing speed. Before I had even finished my sentence, Julian laughed. It was a small, sharp, dismissive sound. "Eliza," he said, patting my hand on the table as if I were a child. "Let's leave the market analysis to the professionals. Shall we? You do not really understand the user-facing issues?" I stared at him. The room was silent. I had designed the user interface from the ground up, but I saw the look in the board members' eyes. They saw the visionary leader, gently correcting his non-tech wife. I said nothing. The sacrifice had become a habit. Then, 18 months ago, Chloe Reed arrived. She was hired as vice president of marketing. She was young, beautiful in a sharp, curated way, and understood nothing about systems architecture, but she understood personal branding. She understood Instagram filters, empty buzzwords, and the power of a compelling false narrative. She did not look at Ethelred as a technology company. She looked at it as Julian's personal stage. She attached herself to him immediately. At first, I was almost relieved. She was handling the branding, a part of the job I despised. But then I saw the changes in Julian. He stopped talking to me about the company's real problems. He started talking at me, using a new, slick vocabulary. Suddenly, everything was about synergy and brand optics and disruptive narratives. My words, the words we built the company on function, efficiency, security, reliability were suddenly old-fashioned. They were legacy words. Just like me, I watched him transform, his speeches becoming hollow, his focus shifting entirely from the product to his own image. He was no longer building a company. He was building a cult of personality, and Chloe was his chief high priestess. The late-night strategy sessions began, the secretive phone calls. The distance between us became a canyon, carved out by words I did not recognize, celebrating a company I no longer knew. The first crack in the facade appeared about 6 months ago. It was not a human failing, it was a digital one, a flicker in the logs. I was running a routine diagnostic on the home security subsystem, something I did on the first of every month. I had built the core to be self-healing, but I was a perfectionist. I was reviewing the access logs for the main server room and Julian's private study when I saw it. Or rather, when I did not see it, there was a gap. From 3:15 a.m. to 5:45 a.m., every Tuesday for the past 4 weeks, the logs for Julian's study were gone, not corrupted, not overwritten. They were precisely, surgically excised. Someone with high-level administrative privileges had been scrubbing the records. There were only 2 people with that level of access: me, the root administrator, and Julian, the primary user. And I had not been deleting them. My first thought was a breach. I spent 48 hours running deep-level intrusion detection scans. The system was pristine. No external attacks, no malware, no piggybacked signals. The commands had come from inside the network, from Julian's own credentials. Why was he systematically erasing his presence in his own office around the same time? The late-night strategy meetings at the Ethelred campus became more frequent. Julian, who had always prized efficiency and hated working past dinner, was now having critical branding sessions with Chloe that stretched past midnight, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. When he came home, he smelled faintly of expensive whiskey and Chloe's sharp floral perfume. He would slip into bed, careful not to wake me, his back to me instantly. Then came the new hardware. Julian suddenly had a sleek, graphite-colored laptop. It was not an Ethelred device. It never connected to our home server. He carried it with him in a new leather briefcase, and it never left his sight. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now perpetually in his pocket, screen down. He set it to Do Not Disturb the moment he walked in the door, a new habit he explained away as minimizing distractions to be more present. But he was never less present. He was a hologram of the man I had married, physically present but digitally, emotionally, somewhere else entirely. I began to feel like a prisoner in the house I had built. My creation, the smart home that was once my pride, was now being used against me. The system I had designed for seamless transparency was being compartmentalized. The open architecture was full of new, locked doors. I would walk into the kitchen, and the lights would adjust to my preferred settings. The speakers would offer my evening focus playlist. The house was still loyal to me, but its master was not. It was a cold, digital mockery. The final, largest crack was the financial one. I reviewed our joint asset statements, another monthly ritual. A significant portion of our liquid assets, several $1,000,000, had been moved. I traced it to a newly formed entity, the Ethelred Innovation Trust. I had never heard of it. I tried to access the trust's documents using our shared financial portal. Access denied. I brought it up to him that evening, careful to keep my voice casual, as if it were a simple bookkeeping query. Julian, I saw you moved the liquid cap funds into a new trust, I said, looking at my tablet. The Innovation Trust. You did not tell me you were setting that up. My name does not seem to be on the access list. He barely looked up from his new, private laptop. Oh, it is just a smart tax move. Legal advised it. He waved a dismissive hand. We need to protect our main assets from any potential frivolous lawsuits. You know how litigious this industry is. It is just a shell. Eliza, nothing for you to worry your head about. He patronized me. Nothing for me to worry my head about. He spoke to me as if I were a child asking about the utility bills. not the co-founder of his company and the woman whose name was on the mortgage he had just leveraged. I would still like access. Julian, I said, my voice firmer. It is a joint asset. I should be a signatory. Shh, his head snapped up. His eyes were cold, annoyed. I am handling it. Eliza, do you not trust me to manage our finances? It was a threat, perfectly veiled as an accusation of disloyalty. He was daring me to challenge him, to call him a liar. I let it go. For now. The time for direct confrontation was over. The time for data collection had begun. He had grown arrogant. He had grown careless. He believed so thoroughly in his own narrative that I was the non-technical wife, and he was the visionary that he had forgotten who I was. He had forgotten that I designed the very network he was using to hide his tracks. The proof came on a Wednesday, exactly 4 weeks before the party. He came home late from another session with Chloe. He went straight to the shower, but he had made a mistake. In his haste, he had tossed his new smartwatch onto the wireless charger on his nightstand. His watch, by default, tried to sync with the nearest hub. And the nearest, most powerful hub was the master server, my server. It connected for less than 60 seconds before he must have realized his error and manually disconnected it from the bathroom. But 60 seconds was all I needed. His private calendar data, the one he kept off the home network, synced to my root system. My terminal pinged with the new data file. I opened it. My breath hitched. It was not just work. It was a recurring entry, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for the last 4 months. Private session, CR. The location was not the office. It was a suite at the Hotel San Cristobal, a boutique hotel downtown known for its discretion. CR, Chloe Reed. The digital proof was cold, absolute. This was not a suspicion. This was a fact. The shock was sharp, a punch to the gut. It was not just corporate maneuvering. It was not just a different vision for the company. It was the oldest, most pathetic cliché in the book. He was sleeping with her. He was sleeping with her, and he was using our money to do it, all while restructuring our assets to lock me out. The icy calm that had settled over me during the party, it was born in that exact moment. The shock receded in less than a minute, replaced by something else. Something cold, precise, and utterly clear. This was no longer a marriage. This was a war, and he had just given me my first piece of ammunition. I did not confront him. I did not cry. I did not throw his watch against the wall. I simply sat at my terminal as the sun began to rise, the calendar entry, private session CR burning on the screen. The shock was a physical thing, a wave of ice water that passed through me, and when it receded, it left behind a structure of pure, cold clarity. The grief was there, a dull ache I partitioned off, but the dominant feeling was focus. The kind of focus I usually reserved for finding a critical flaw in a million lines of code. Julian's greatest, most fatal error was not his infidelity. It was not his greed. It was his arrogance. He had been the face for so long that he had genuinely started to believe his own press. He had forgotten who wrote the source code. He had forgotten that I, the reclusive architect, had built the digital kingdom he now claimed to rule. And he had forgotten, or perhaps never even known, about the back door. When I designed the core 10 years ago, I built in a failsafe. It was not just an administrative account. It was a true root-level protocol, hard-coded into the firmware, invisible to any user-level scan, including Julian's. It was a digital ghost key that bypassed all standard permissions, all firewalls. I had intended it as a last resort recovery tool, a way to rebuild the system from the ground up if it ever suffered a catastrophic system-wide failure. It was the architect's signature, hidden in the foundation. I had never used it. Until now. I went to my terminal. My fingers did not shake. I typed a single 24-character alphanumeric string. The system interface, usually a friendly, blue-toned ethyl red design, vanished. It was replaced by a simple black command line prompt. Root access granted. Execute protocol, I typed. Execute Sentinel. Active capture. All nodes. Sentinel was a dormant protocol I had written. It activated the high-fidelity microphones in every Ethelred smart speaker and the wide angle, high-definition cameras in every Ethelred conference room hub, including the one in Julian's private study and the main corporate boardroom. It was designed as a diagnostic tool to capture environmental data in case of system faults. It also, conveniently, captured every word, every whisper. The data would not be stored on the local servers, where Julian's tech team might find it. It would be encrypted and streamed directly to a private offshore server I held under a shell corporation. Julian was cutting me out. So I was cutting myself in. I spent the next week living a double life. By day, I was Eliza Vance, the quiet, supportive wife. I discussed catering options for the launch party. I listened with a sympathetic, concerned expression as Julian complained about supply chain issues. By night, I became a digital archaeologist, sifting through the wreckage of my marriage and his integrity. I did not have to sift for long. The truth was not buried. It was loud, obnoxious, and parading in plain sight. The affair with Chloe was just the appetizer. The reality was so much worse. I listened to them for hours. I watched them in the boardroom, their feet up on the mahogany table after the other executives had left. I listened to them in his study, mixing drinks, laughing. She honestly had no idea about the trust, Julian bragged, his voice slurring slightly from the whiskey. She asked me about it, all wide-eyed. I should be a signatory. Can you believe it? Chloe's laugh was sharp. Well, what did you expect? Jay, she is old furniture. She came with the house. You cannot expect her to understand high-level strategy. She is just legacy weight. You have to cut legacy weight. Legacy weight. Old furniture. That was me. Then, the conversations turned to the party. The launch party. My party. It was their idea. And the plan was not just to launch a product. It was to launch their coup. It has to be public, Chloe insisted, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. We cannot just have lawyers send her papers. It gets messy. It gets sympathetic. She will try to fight for the company, for her core project. So what is the angle? Julian asked. The angle is mental fatigue, Chloe said, and my blood ran cold. She has been reclusive for years. We just push that narrative. She is unstable. The pressure has gotten to her. She is not the woman she used to be. She is fragile. Julian caught on instantly. So, at the party, I make the announcement. I celebrate the future, and I gently, sadly, announce that Eliza is stepping back. For her health? Exactly, Chloe confirmed. She will be blindsided. She will be in a room full of 200 investors and press. She will cry. She will make a scene. She will prove our point for us. She will look unstable. And then, when we file the papers on Monday, no one will question it. The board will side with us. The press will report our version. She will be deemed emotionally unfit to be a partner. My hand flew to my mouth, a choked sound escaping. It was not just a divorce. It was a character assassination, a premeditated strike designed to invalidate me completely. And they had the paperwork ready. I watched them review the documents on Julian's private laptop, screen shared to the boardroom monitor, legal papers, drafted by a shark firm I did not recognize, affidavits from 2 executive coaches I had never met, attesting to my increased isolation and emotional volatility. A petition to have me declared mentally incompetent to participate in Ethelred's corporate decisions, citing my erratic behavior and clear mental fatigue. They were not just planning to divorce me. They were planning to erase me, to take my name off the company I had built from nothing and lock me in a gilded cage with no assets and no voice, all under the guise of concern for my health. I sat in the dark of my own study for a long time. The cold clarity was gone, replaced by a slow, burning rage. He would not just discard me. He would not paint me as insane. He would not take what was mine. I spent the next 3 hours copying everything. Every audio file, every video file, every email, every document from the Innovation Trust. I put it all onto a single, enterprise-grade encrypted hard drive. The plan was no longer to survive the divorce. The plan was to win the war. They had written their script for the party. It was time for me to write mine. 3 days later, I was on a flight to Denver, Colorado. I booked the ticket under my maiden name, Eliza Hayes, a name Julian had not heard in a decade. I told Julian I was visiting a college friend who was going through a difficult time and needed support. He was almost delighted at the idea, patting my head and telling me to take all the time I needed. It fed perfectly into his narrative of the fragile, emotional woman detaching from reality. I was not visiting a friend. I was retaining an army. I did not go to a standard divorce lawyer. Julian would expect that. He would anticipate a fight over the house, the cars, the joint bank accounts. He was preparing for a domestic dispute. I was preparing for a corporate takeover. Diana Kale's office was on the 42nd floor of a steel and glass tower. Her name was spoken in hushed, terrified tones in Silicon Valley and on Wall Street. She was not a divorce lawyer. She was a high-stakes corporate litigator who specialized in intellectual property theft and complex financial fraud. She was, to put it simply, a shark. She was in her 60s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to see every calculation I had ever made. I did not cry. I did not speak of my husband's affair. I presented my case as I would a systems analysis. I handed her the encrypted hard drive. This contains audio, video, and financial documents, I said. It details a conspiracy to defraud a co-founder and a plan to declare me mentally incompetent to seize control of my intellectual property. For 2 hours, we sat in her soundproof conference room, the only noise the quiet click of her mouse as she reviewed the files. She watched Julian and Chloe plan my demise. She read the forged affidavits. She traced the initial flow of money into the Innovation Trust. When she was done, she closed the laptop, folded her hands, and looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. "Oh, he calls you old furniture," she said. It was not a question. "He calls me legacy weight," I replied. Diana Kale smiled. It was a cold, thin, terrifying smile. "Mrs. Vance, no, Ms. Hayes, this is not a divorce. A divorce is a squabble over assets. This is a war for an empire, and the good news is, we are going to win." "There is more," I said. "He is arrogant. The trust is just the beginning. I need someone to follow the rest of the money. Someone who works. Outside of traditional channels." Diana nodded, already understanding. "You need Wraith." Wraith was a ghost, a legend in cybersecurity circles. No one knew his real name. He was a digital forensic accountant who had taken down 2 hedge funds and a South American cartel, all from a keyboard. Diana made one call. A meeting was set for that afternoon in a nondescript data center in the suburbs. Wraith was younger than I expected, with restless eyes and a hoodie pulled low. I gave him a copy of the drive and a single directive. Julian created the Innovation Trust to hide his assets from me. I suspect he is hiding things from his partners, too. He is too arrogant to just be a simple adulterer. Find out where the rest of the money is going. Find out what he is really funding. Wraith took the drive. He left digital footprints. He was arrogant. They always are. I will find them. I flew back to Austin that night. When I walked through the door of my glass-walled prison, Julian was on the sofa, scrolling through his private laptop. "Hey," he said, barely looking up. "Your friend doing okay?" "She is just overwhelmed," I said, letting my voice crack just a little. "Struggling. It was a lot." "Well, try not to let it get to you," he said, his tone one of mild inconvenience. "We have the launch party in 3 weeks. I need you focused. Eliza." at least as much as you can be. It was perfect. I started to play the part they had written for me. I became fragile. I forgot things. I seemed anxious, nervous about the stress of the upcoming launch. I would walk into a room and pretend to forget why I was there. I let Julian see me struggling. He and Chloe exchanged knowing, satisfied glances. I was making their job so much easier. 2 weeks before the party, I approached Julian while he was having his morning coffee. "Julian," I said, wringing my hands, "I have been thinking about the launch. The venue rental at the Domain is so expensive and impersonal." He sighed. "Eliza, we have been over this. It is a corporate expense." I know, I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. "It is just, with everything, I was thinking, why not have it here at the house? It is our greatest showcase. It is intimate. It would show the investors we are being careful. You know, cost-conscious." I watched his eyes. I saw the calculations. A party at the house. With me, his fragile, unstable wife, as the hostess. The optics were perfect. He could control the environment. He could parade me in front of the board. And when I finally, publicly, broke down, everyone would be a witness. It was the perfect stage for my execution. That is, actually not a bad idea. "Eliza," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Intimate. I like it. Cost-effective. Smart. See, you are still in there." He tapped my head condescendingly. "I can help," I offered, my voice small. "I can work with the tech team, make sure the presentation systems, all the AV, are perfectly integrated with the house systems." "Great," he said, already texting Chloe the good news. "You do that. Take charge of it. It will be good for you." The next day, the Ethelred tech team arrived. They were young, smart, and utterly loyal to Julian, the visionary. They saw me as the founder's quiet wife. I helped them. I made them coffee. And while they were running cables on the terrace, I accessed the primary presentation hub. They were setting up a standard, secure network, but they did not know about my root access. They did not know about the back door. It took me less than 5 minutes. I integrated my Sentinel protocol directly into the launch presentation's source code. The presentation would run off Julian's laptop, but it would be routed through my core. I was no longer just a passive listener. I was now the stage manager. I could see everything on his laptop. I could control the feed. When Julian stood up on that stage, he would not be running his presentation. He would be running mine. The call came at 3:17 in the morning, a week before the party. It was not my standard phone. It was a hardened, encrypted device Diana Kale had given me. The ringtone was a jarring digital shriek that cut through the silence of the bedroom. Julian mumbled in his sleep, swatting at the air. I slipped out of bed, grabbing the device, and locked myself in the master bathroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. I answered, "Hayes. Wraith, you were right." His voice was stripped of its usual detached calm. It was urgent, almost strained. "He is not just arrogant, he is a sociopath. This is so much bigger than a trust fund." "What did you find?" I whispered, the cold marble floor chilling my feet. "I followed the money from the Innovation Trust. It was a maze, designed to make a pursuer give up. But he is sloppy. He used the same encryption patterns he uses for Ethelred. Your patterns. He routed the money, but he was funding a ghost project. Something buried so deep in the Ethelred mainframes that it does not even exist on paper. A ghost project. He calls it Project Daedalus. And Eliza," he paused, and the fact that he used my first name terrified me. "He built it by perverting your core." A wave of nausea hit me. "What do you mean? What does it do?" "Daedalus is not a new product," Wraith explained, his voice tight. "It is a parasitic code. He has been embedding it in the last 2 major software updates for every Ethelred smart home system. Your core was designed to integrate and secure. His version. It intercepts. It records. It steals. I sank down onto the bath mat, the device cold against my ear. What does it steal? Everything, Wraith said flatly. It is a universal interceptor. It logs every search query. It records ambient audio from the smart speakers, listening for financial keywords, trade secrets, legal discussions. It copies browsing history, and, God help us, it captures intermittent, 30-second video feeds from every active Ethelred security camera, private conversations, arguments, board members discussing strategy in their own homes, financial models, even. Eliza, it is capturing video from inside people's houses. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was not a plan to siphon money. This was a surveillance dragnet on a colossal scale. We had over 50,000 high-end users, politicians, CEOs, hedge fund managers. Who is he selling it to? I asked, my voice barely audible. Not who. What? He is not selling it to a competitor. He is selling it to a single black market data broker. This broker then chops up the data and sells it to the highest bidders, rival corporations. Sure, but also unfriendly foreign intelligence agencies. The broker has known ties. The bathroom, once my sterile sanctuary, felt like it was spinning. This was not civil fraud. This was not a domestic dispute. What he was describing was a catastrophic, company-ending criminal conspiracy. This was a massive violation of the Federal Wiretap Act. This was a breach of every data privacy law on the books. This was, in no uncertain terms, corporate espionage that bled into actual espionage. He was selling out our users, our country, for profit. The money, I whispered, my mind racing. Where is the money? That is the genius part, Wraith said, the sarcasm thick. He is being paid in cryptocurrency. Untraceable, anonymous wallets. He probably thinks he is a ghost, that he can just cash it all out from a non-extradition country. He has already funneled over $40 million in the last 6 months alone. So it is gone, I said, a statement of defeat. No, that is why I called. Wraith's voice was sharp again, the predator back in control. He is an arrogant amateur, Eliza. He used a proprietary encryption method to secure his wallet keys, thinking it was clever, but he based it on an algorithm he and I both know. He based it on my original core code. I finished, the realization dawning. Exactly. It took me 72 hours, but I cracked it. I have the keys. All of them. I am looking at $42 million right now, sitting in 5 separate wallets. I closed my eyes. The man I had married, the man I had built a dream with, was a traitor. He was not just leaving me for a younger woman. He was not just trying to steal my share of the company. He was planning to destroy it. This was his exit strategy. The party was the final act. He would publicly discard me, liquidate the company's real assets into the Innovation Trust, and then, when the inevitable data breach was finally discovered, he would already be gone. He would be on a beach with Chloe, tens of millions of dollars richer, while the company I had built my child, my legacy, was utterly annihilated, buried under a mountain of federal lawsuits and consumer rage. He was not just cutting me out. He was burning the entire empire to the ground to cover his escape. Eliza. Wraith's voice pulled me back. I stood up, my reflection in the dark mirror a pale, hollow-eyed mask. The woman who had been weeping over a simple affair was gone. The woman who had been planning a civil fight was gone. Send me the keys, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the marble beneath my feet. Send me everything you have on Project Daedalus, the code, the buyers, the transaction logs. Done, he said. I hung up. I looked at the dark, silent house around me. My house, my system, my company. He was not just going to divorce me. He was not just going to rob me. He was going to burn my life's work for cash. He thought he was building an escape. He had no idea I was building a cage. The Project Daedalus files changed everything. This was no longer a domestic battle. It was a federal crime. 1 week before the party, I was not in Denver. I was in a sterile, windowless conference room in a downtown Austin federal building. The air was stale, smelling of old coffee. Diana Cale sat beside me, her posture like steel. Across the table were not just lawyers, but 2 men and a woman who introduced themselves as federal prosecutors from the Cybercrime Division. They had reviewed Wraith's data for 12 straight hours. Their faces were grim. Ms. Hayes, the lead prosecutor, a man named Roberts, said, "What your husband has built is one of the most significant domestic surveillance for profit schemes we have ever seen. The damage is incalculable. He is planning to flee," I said, my voice flat. "The party is his exit strategy. He will announce his new partnership, publicly discredit me, and by the time anyone uncovers Daedalus, he and his $40 million will be in a country with no extradition treaty." Diana Cale spoke. "My client is the sole architect of the core system. She is also the one who discovered the breach. She has not participated in Project Daedalus in any way. She is, in fact, its primary victim." "We understand that," the prosecutor said. "Your evidence is comprehensive. Frankly, it is the entire case. We are prepared to move, but you said he is planning to flee. We cannot risk that. We need to catch him in the act, along with his co-conspirators." "The party," I said. "He is planning to make his announcement at the party." A plan formed, cold and brutal, in the fluorescent light of that room. They needed an undeniable public confession. I needed my company back. They offered me conditional immunity, a formal whistleblower status, in exchange for my full cooperation. The trap had to be perfect. "He wants to paint me as unstable," I told them. "He expects me to break down. I need to be that person. I need to be completely oblivious, completely broken until the last possible second." The federal team agreed. They would be off-site, in a mobile command van just down the street from my house. They would move in on my signal. "And, Ms. Hayes," the lead prosecutor added, his eyes locking on mine, "for this to work, you must be convincing. Until the moment it begins, you are a victim. You are nothing else. Can you do that?" I thought of Julian's laugh. I thought of Chloe calling me old furniture. "Yes," I said. "I can." The day of the party was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. I had not slept. I applied makeup to look pale, to enhance the dark circles under my eyes. I let my hands tremble. I played the part of the nervous, fragile hostess, fluttering around the caterers, accidentally misplacing the seating chart, and looking to Julian with wide, panicked eyes for reassurance. It was exactly what he wanted. He and Chloe were electric, high on their own brilliance. They moved through the house as a unit, a new power couple, barely concealing their contempt for me. Julian was magnanimous, patting my shoulder, telling me, "Just relax, Eliza. It is all under control. Try to enjoy it." Chloe, in a stunningly bright red dress, helped me, which meant she moved things I had already arranged and spoke to me in a slow, patronizing tone one uses for a difficult child. 1 hour before the guests were scheduled to arrive, Julian found me in the kitchen, agonizing over the champagne flutes. "Eliza, come on," he said, exasperated. He was already in his custom tuxedo, the one I had bought him for our 5th anniversary. "I want you to see this before I go up." He pulled out his phone and showed me the notes for his speech. I read the words, my words, phrases I had used to describe our original dream, now twisted. He spoke of dynamic new partnerships, of streamlining operations, and then the killing blow. "We must be willing to make the necessary sacrifices," he had written, "and cut away the parts of our past, however foundational, that are holding back the future." He was gloating. He was showing me the script of my own execution. "It is Strong. Julian, I managed to say, my voice breathy. It is honest, he said, radiating self-satisfaction. It is time for a new era. He turned to go, adjusting his cuffs. This was the moment. I grabbed a full glass of red wine from the counter, one I had poured for this exact purpose. Julian, wait, I called out, my voice high and thin. He turned back, annoyed. What is it? I stumbled forward, my ankle twisting. I just wanted to wish you... I let the glass go. The dark red liquid arced through the air and splashed, with perfect, devastating accuracy, all over the front of his pristine white tuxedo shirt and his jacket. Silence. Julian looked down, his face contorted, going from white to a deep, apoplectic red. You clumsy idiot, he hissed, his voice a low snarl, the facade gone for just a second. This is a custom jacket. Do you know what you have done? Chloe, who had seen it from the hall, ran in. Oh my God, Julian. She ruined it. She did it on purpose. I did not. I wailed, collapsing against the counter, finally letting the real, hot tears of rage and adrenaline flow. I just tripped. I am so sorry. Julian, I am so sorry. It was perfect. I was hysterical. I was the unstable wife, ruining his big night. Just get out, he roared. Go get dressed. Try not to ruin anything else, Chloe. Help me. He ripped the jacket off, throwing it to the floor, and stormed up the stairs toward our bedroom to find a new shirt and jacket. Chloe was right behind him, shooting me a look of pure hatred. The moment they were out of sight, I stopped crying. Instantly. The kitchen was empty. The catering staff was on the terrace. I walked, my steps silent and fast, to the main presentation laptop sitting on the lectern by the stage. The tech team had set it up and left. From the pocket of my dressing gown, I pulled a tiny black USB drive. The drive Wraith had prepared. It held the payload, the entire case, the videos, the audio, the Daedalus code, the crypto wallet keys. I bent down, as if checking a cable. My hand was steady. I slotted the drive into the rear USB port, a port no one would see. The system I had helped set up immediately recognized it. My backdoor protocol took over, absorbing the drive's contents, making them the new source file for the presentation, all while still displaying Julian's Ethelred Innovations logo on the laptop screen. The entire operation took less than 10 seconds. I stood up, walked calmly to the powder room, and locked the door. I pulled out the encrypted burner phone. I sent a single pre-written text message to the number Diana Kale had given me. The message had only 3 words. System is ready. He waited. Julian waited for me to shatter. The silence in our $100,000 party was absolute, a vacuum created by his stunning cruelty. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, a collective, morbid anticipation. They were waiting for the tears he had scripted. They were waiting for the hysteria he had manufactured. Beside him, Chloe Reed was smiling, a look of smug, victorious pity on her 28-year-old face. Julian's own expression was one of bored finality, the look of a man who had just completed a distasteful but necessary task. He had cut the legacy weight. I did not run. I did not cry. My body was humming with a cold, clear energy. I simply set my untouched, warm champagne flute down on a passing waiter's tray. I turned and took 3 steps toward the stage, toward the lectern where Julian stood. He watched me, his brow furrowing in irritation. He probably thought I was going to beg, to whisper, to make a scene. Eliza. Not now, he hissed, moving to block me. I ignored him. There was a backup microphone on a stand, intended for a Q&A that would never happen. I lifted it from its cradle. The small click as my thumb found the switch was amplified, a sharp, metallic snap that echoed across the silent terrace. You are right, Julian. My voice was not the sob he expected. It was not a whisper. It was clear. It was strong. It was amplified, rolling over the stunned crowd with absolute, icy precision. Julian's head snapped back slightly, his eyes narrowing. Chloe's smile wavered. "The future," I continued, my voice perfectly level, "truly does require transparency." This was not in his script. I saw the flash of annoyance in his eyes turn to genuine confusion. "Eliza, what are you doing?" he said, his voice low, still trying to control the narrative. "Get off the stage. You are embarrassing yourself." I held the microphone firmly. "And as the chief architect of the Ethelred Corps," I announced, my voice rising, "I made sure to install a transparency protocol years ago, for situations just like this." I reached into the pocket of my silk dress and pulled out my personal phone. I held it up so he could see it. On the screen was a single custom app icon I had designed that morning, a simple red button labeled Execute. "What is this?" Julian barked, his mask of calm finally cracking, revealing the bully beneath. "Security, get her off the stage." But the security guards were his, and they were staring, mesmerized, like everyone else. I ignored him. I looked out at the investors, at the press, at the faces of the people who had come to celebrate my humiliation, and I pressed the button. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then, every giant LED screen surrounding the pool and on the terrace walls, all of them displaying the sleek, blue Ethelred logo, flickered and went black. A collective gasp sucked the air from the terrace. The curated playlist died. The only sound was the running water of the infinity pool, suddenly loud in the dead quiet. "What the hell is going on?" an investor yelled from the front row. "Julian, what is this?" Then the screens lit up, all of them. It was not the Ethelred logo. It was an email client. The subject line was stark, displayed in a font 3 feet high, "Eliza Strategy." The "from" was Chloe Reed. The "to" was Julian Vance. The crowd began to read. I did not have to speak. The screens were doing it for me. They were reading the plan. They were seeing Chloe's words. "We have to frame her as unstable. Mental fatigue. She is old furniture. J, and it is time to put her in storage. She is just legacy weight." I watched the color drain from Julian's face. His curated tan, his healthy glow, vanished, leaving a sick, pale green. The screens scrolled automatically, in perfect sync. The next email, Julian's reply, "The board will buy it. Her reclusive nature is the perfect groundwork. We will cite erratic behavior and emotional volatility. Have legal draft the incompetency papers." "Oh my God," someone whispered. It was not a whisper for long. The sound of 200 smartphones being unlocked, 200 cameras being raised, filled the air. The tech bloggers, the ones who had been eating Julian's free shrimp, were now recording his execution, their faces alive with the thrill of a career-making scandal. "Turn it off," Julian snarled, his voice no longer smooth or controlled. He lunged for the lectern, for his laptop, the one he thought was running the presentation. He slammed the lid shut. The screens did not flicker. They kept scrolling. "Turn it off," he bellowed, this time at the tech team cowering by the soundboard. "Kill the power! Kill the power now!" A terrified technician fumbled with the controls. Nothing! The system was not responding to him. Julian grabbed the laptop, yanking the power cord from the socket. He looked at the screens, which were now displaying the forged affidavits from the executive coaches attesting to my mental fatigue and isolation. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wild. "It is not the laptop, Julian," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through his panic. He turned to the house control panel, the one mounted into the main wall. He was the master of this house. He slammed his hand against the screen, trying to access the master controls, to shut down the entire network. The screen flashed a bright, cold red. "Access denied. Root administrator lockout." He stared at it, uncomprehending. He tried again. stabbing the screen with his finger. Access denied. He turned, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He finally understood. "You are not the administrator, Julian," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing across his silent, horrified party. "You are just a user, and your privileges have been revoked." "But as shocking as all this is," I said, my voice cutting through the rising murmur of the crowd, "this personal betrayal is nothing." I let that hang in the air. Julian, who had been staring at the access denied message in mute horror, looked up at me, his face a mask of confusion. Chloe, who had been trying to shrink behind him, whimpered. "It is nothing," I repeated. "Compared to the professional betrayal." The screens went black again. The silence was immediate. The crowd was now a terrified animal, waiting for the next blow. "Julian did not just defraud me," I said. "He defrauded all of you. He defrauded every single Ethelred customer." The screens lit up. Gone were the emails. In their place were complex system schematics, lines of code, and a single ominous project title, Project Daedalus. "Julian has been rather busy," I said, my voice a cold, precise narrative. "He did not just build a new marketing plan. He built a parasitic surveillance tool. He used my core, our core, as a weapon against our own users. The technical diagrams were dense, but the investors understood flowcharts. They understood the labels. User data intercept, audio capture ambient, video feed copy, financial keyword logging." "Why, what is this?" The same investor who had yelled before, a man named Marcus Thorne, a key partner in our Series B funding, was now on his feet. "Julian, what is this?" Julian was mute. He was white as a sheet, his eyes darting between the screens and me, his mind finally, sluggishly, catching up to the scale of his miscalculation. "Let's listen," I said. I tapped another control on my phone. The screens changed, and a sound file visualization appeared. Then, sound. It was Julian's voice, captured in the boardroom. He was laughing. "They are so stupid." His voice boomed across his own party, echoing off the glass walls. "They beg us to put these things in their homes. They pay us for the privilege of being spied on. They have no idea the microphone is always listening." Then Chloe's laugh, sharp and cruel. "Security. That is the best part. They think it is keeping them safe. We are logging every financial model they discuss, every password they say out loud." The crowd was a sea of pale, horrified faces. The journalists were no longer just recording, they were live streaming. This was not a local scandal. This was a global technology catastrophe happening in real time. "That is not all," I said, my voice without mercy. The audio file was replaced by a video. It was grainy, captured from the boardroom hub. It was not Julian and Chloe. It was Julian and another man. A man in an expensive, ill-fitting suit, with a face I did not recognize. He looked dangerous. We were all watching Julian, in his own boardroom, negotiating the sale of his customers' private data. "The data set is clean," Julian was saying on the video. "Full audio from the C-suite execs on our client list, their home offices, their bedrooms. The price is non-negotiable. $10 million for the quarter." The shady broker smiled. "The foreign intelligence clients will be very, very pleased, especially with the politicians' data. A pleasure doing business." A woman in the front row, a prominent local politician who had our system installed in her home, made a strangled sound. Marcus Thorne, the investor, looked like he was going to be physically ill. You did what," he choked out, staring at Julian. That is federal. That is the Espionage Act. You sold us out. You sold the country out." "He did not just sell you out, Marcus," I said, my voice rising. "He stole from you, too." The screens changed one last time. It was a dizzying, complex map of financial transactions. Money flowed from the innovation trust I was locked out of, through a dozen shell corporations, and finally landed in 5 heavily encrypted cryptocurrency wallets. And at the bottom of the screen, a number that grew as Wraith's program finished its real-time calculation. $42,150,000. Julian, my brilliant, charismatic husband, finally broke. He sank to his knees on his own stage. Chloe was not so quiet. She let out a long, shuddering wail and collapsed onto the floor, her red dress pooling around her, sobbing, "No, no, 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 no." I looked down at the man I had once loved, the man who had called me old furniture. He was a shell, his arrogance incinerated, leaving only a pathetic, terrified core. I stepped closer to him, lowering the microphone just slightly. "You did not just upgrade your wife, Julian," I said, my voice clear and carrying to every corner of the yard. "You did not just try to cut legacy weight. You violated federal law. You betrayed the trust of millions of people, and you did it all using the system I built." The silence was gone. It was replaced by a roar. It was the sound of chaos. Investors were screaming, not just at Julian, but at each other. They were on their phones, not to the press, but to their lawyers, to their bankers, yelling, "Sell it all, it is over." The party, his coronation, had become his indictment. And every single witness had a camera. "Turn it off, turn it off, turn it off, now." Julian was screaming, a raw, primal sound of pure panic. He was still on his knees, clawing at the unresponsive control panel on the wall, his fingernails scraping uselessly against the dark glass. "Somebody shut it down." The chaotic roar of the investors quieted for a moment, all eyes turning back to me as I stood on the stage, the microphone still in my hand. "It will not obey you, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through his hysterics. "This house, this company, this entire system only recognizes one root administrator, and that is me." As if summoned by my words, a new, intense light flooded the terrace. It was not the soft, ambient lighting I had designed for the party. It was the harsh, white glare of 2 industrial spotlights. They cut through the darkness from the end of the lawn, pinning the front entrance of the house in a brutal, revealing beam. The massive glass front doors, which were supposed to be locked for the event, slid open with a quiet, hydraulic hiss. My system, obeying my command. 3 figures stepped out of the darkness and into the spotlight. The crowd, which had been surging toward Julian with accusations, fell back, creating a wide, clear path. The woman in the center was Diana Kale. Her steel gray hair was immaculate, her face was set like granite, and she wore a dark, severe suit that was all business. She was not alone. She was flanked by 2 men in dark, perfectly pressed suits, their faces impassive, their posture rigid. They had the unmistakable air of federal law enforcement. Diana Kale did not pause. She did not look at the crowd. She walked with a predator's focus, her heels clicking decisively on the limestone terrace, straight toward the stage, straight toward Julian and Chloe. She stopped less than 5 feet from them. The 2 agents fanned out slightly, one moving toward Chloe, who was still a sobbing heap on the floor, the other standing over Julian. Julian Vance, Chloe Reed. Diana Kale's voice was not amplified, but it was so sharp and clear that it silenced the entire party. There was no room for negotiation in her tone. There was only judgment. "You are both under arrest," she declared, "for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and multiple violations of the Espionage Act." The words Espionage Act landed like a physical blow. The remaining murmurs of the crowd died instantly. This was no longer a corporate implosion. It was a matter of national security. The first agent bent down and hauled Chloe to her feet, his voice a low, firm monotone. "You have the right to remain silent." As he pulled her hands behind her back, the metallic ratchet of the handcuffs was shockingly loud. Chloe let out a high-pitched, animalistic shriek, the second agent pulled Julian up from his knees. For a moment, Julian just stared at him, his mind completely broken, unable to process this final, impossible reality. Then, the agent put his hands on him. It was the touch that broke the spell. Julian's terror turned, in a split second, to pure, unadulterated rage. He twisted, trying to pull away, his eyes wild and red, searching the stage. He found me. "You!" he roared, his voice cracking. You did this! You! Bitch! You destroyed everything! You destroyed my company!" He lunged, not for the agent, but for me. He never had a chance. The agent, faster than I could have imagined, spun him around, slammed him face down onto the lectern that still held his useless laptop, and pinned his arms behind his back with brutal efficiency. The second set of handcuffs snapped shut. "You destroyed everything," he screamed again, his voice muffled against the wood, his face contorted. I stepped forward. I leaned in close, so close that only he could hear me, my voice a quiet, final incision. "No, Julian," I whispered. "You built a house on a faulty foundation. You built an empire on lies. I just exposed the cracks." I stepped back. The agents began to lead them away, a path clearing for them as they walked past the 200 guests who were now, for all intents and purposes, witnesses for the prosecution. They were walked past the investors whose money they had stolen. They were walked past the journalists who were documenting their final, humiliating exit. As the agents led them out of the light and into the darkness, the party was left in a state of stunned, absolute silence. The spotlights snapped off, plunging the terrace back into the ambient, chaotic light of phone screens. Then, the panic. "It is over!" someone shouted. "Ethelred is finished. We are ruined. The stock will be zero by morning." What happens now? What about our investments? What about the data? Is the system even safe? All at once, the crowd, this panicked, desperate mob of investors and board members, turned. They did not move toward the exit. They moved toward me. Marcus Thorne, the lead investor, was at the front, his face pale but his eyes sharp. "Eliza," he said, his voice urgent. "Is it true? Is the core compromised? Is the whole company poisoned?" They all surged forward, a wave of questions, a desperate search for a life raft. Can it be saved? What do we do? "Eliza, you are the architect. You built it. Can you fix this?" I stood there, on the stage that was supposed to be my humiliation, and looked at the empire that was now, suddenly, mine to command. I looked at the glass house, my design. I looked at the system, my code. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "Ethelred Innovations, as Julian built it, is toxic. It is dead," I said, and the crowd flinched. "But the core," I continued, my voice resonating with the authority they were so desperate to hear. "The core is strong. The foundation I built is clean. He corrupted it, but I can restore it." I looked out at their faces, at the entire shattered edifice of my old life. "Tomorrow," I declared, "we begin the rebuild. My way." Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments so we can connect. And please share your thoughts on the story. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.